connection to the fuel prices and the food prices increase in connection to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Mr. George, I think this question is addressed to you. How are we affected with the Russian-Ukraine conflict and the inflation?
Well, the Russian-Ukraine conflict, of course, does not affect us directly in any manner, but the indirect effects are very, very extensive. No, so for one, we are being asked to take for one the inflation in food and commodities is hitting us, not just us, but all over the world. Although we're not hit as badly as the countries that are directly bringing in the relying on Ukraine or Russia for energy or for food. But for instance, our gasoline has moved up from within a few months, from maybe 2-3 months, from 50 pesos to nearly 90 pesos by today. No, so that's very substantial for wage earners. And the food also has gone up in many categories for more than 50%. And we are faced with a potential shortage because India, Vietnam, and so forth are talking about banning exports of various foodstuffs, including rice. So whereas wheat also, wheat has been gone on a worldwide shortage, and fertilizers is also affecting us because Ukraine and Russia are a very substantial percent of the world's fertilizer supply. And these are very much, to some extent, the Western media has portrayed this also as due to Russian aggression. But in actuality, of course, all Russia had been asking for, if we are going to look at it, is that they are guaranteed that the West does not put their weapons in Ukraine, or they enter into an alliance in which such weapons would be placed in a manner that might be of a threat to Russia. And that's all they were asking for, as well as the application of the Minsk Agreement, which is to honor the autonomy of the eastern regions, which instead of being honored, the Ukrainians had canceled the use of the Russian language of the 30% of their population, right? And so Russia has not blocked the exports. And in fact, it is due to the sanctions of the US that has sanctioned not only agriculture, minerals, and commodities. And Russia is very willing to give us oil and gas. And that's something maybe we should consider, because the EU continues to buy oil. Japan continues to buy, US continues to buy, India is buying a multiple of the amount. And why does the Philippines not buy this oil being sold at 25% less than market price? But that's really up to the government. What we are saying is that the inflation is very much so. One is because of the war has been affecting the logistics of everything. And then there is the sanctions, which is really US imposed on the rest of the world. There is also the quantitative easing of the US in response to the pandemic, which is a very big factor because they released something between $4 and $6 trillion for the pandemic, way more than's needed. So what happens here is they printed more money to pay for our goods, Chinese goods, Russian goods, European goods, and they bought all these items without producing anything more, because the US released this money. While they released it, they did not produce more goods. And in fact, 5 million American citizens decided that they had a good enough life that, and in protest, they didn't want to go back to work. So production actually went down. Whereas if we look at countries like China, the easing that they did, a lot of it went into infrastructure, which made them even more efficient than before, such that a lot of companies that came out and produced outside of China went back into China. So it's creating a production shortfall, a logistics shortfall, and an excess of cash. And this is, and also the U.S. policy is causing a drop in efficiency of worldwide production, because they're trying to turn the world into a buy two systems instead of one. So instead of integrating and making everything more efficient, they're dividing the world into different systems of economy. And so we have, this is a very important aspect, because this is not part of our fight. and we are being affected by the fight in Ukraine, and very possibly, not possibly, but very, I mean, definitely we are going to be brought into this fight with Taiwan, and we have to be very gentle and be very agile in the way we continue to deal with the two blocks, two superpower blocks, without getting caught in between, or least of all, becoming part of an actual front line like the Ukraine. Nothing was gained by it.
Thank you, Mr. George, for that global analysis. Professor Ranjit and Mr. George, this question came from our media friends as well. What do you look for? What are you look forward to in the first 100 days of President-elect Bongbong Marcos? Or what do you hope to see?
Yeah, well, hopefully, the key challenge for the next administration is economic recovery. So it's economic recovery, economic recovery, economic recovery. It's not build, it's that. How are we going to restart the economy? And so a plan has to be put in place. Hopefully, as I stated, a plan that's that has equity, as far as sharing the burden of generating revenues. I'm hoping that he will continue many of the programs already started and initiated by the last administration, the last Congress. We're looking at a clearer set of interventions now for the poor. So social safety nets, I think, are the key things for me in the first 100 days. Is he going to increase? Advance all these programs that were started in the Duterte administration, which were very populist, but also very examples of a social redistribution, or will he cut it down? Those are the things. Or will he, for example, expand CCT, improve its implementation? How is he going to implement because there's going to be a new bayanihan, or bangon bayan law, or BBM thing, or some sort of stimulus package. That's the first. I think that's priority. So the stimulus package, how is it going to look like? How is it going to be funded, and who are going to be the primary beneficiaries of this stimulus package? My own focus as a social scientist is that I think the economy will grow. I share the bullishness of George, and as we manage COVID, the economy will restart. But in the end, we will still be left with the inequities that we still had before the pandemic started. And those inequities, given the political capital that this president has.
Professor Ranjit,
Sir, you're on mute.
Please repeat your last 30 seconds.
Yeah. Given the incredible political capital of this new incoming administration, it's important, and of course the brand, the Marcos brand, and the burden of that brand. It's important. The important focus for the first 100 days is not just restarting the economy on a policy level, but focusing on the people. His first 100 days has to focus on redistributing support and aid to the people who are all suffering at the moment, and continue to suffer because of the pandemic. So the stimulus package is important. The expansion of CCT is important. The expansion of other social development programs is important. So that's what I expect in the first 100 days.
Mr. George, first 100 days of President-elect Bongbong Marcos.
The first 100 days, I think they've succeeded pretty well on the first step of conveying a potential management that people have confidence in. So that has been acknowledged by international publications and institutions in the selection of people. Next, of course, is the confidence in terms of the fundamentals of business, in terms of how they deal in terms for contracts and investments, and to attract these, because these are needed to increase our employment and opportunities. Very important also, of course, is the relationships that they will build, especially between the US and China, because any kind of instability here would make it almost impossible for new external investors to consider, because any kind of return you make, if you are in a problem in terms of the the geopolitics here, people have seen what happened to Ukraine and other countries that ended up in a direct conflict. That would scare off everybody. And from a business viewpoint, the control of inflation is very important, both for domestic people and for because of their consumption, especially the regular people, wage earners, it would affect their daily life very extensively, because an increase of 50% or so in terms of cost of living, even if it's temporary, is very telling on the people. We do have to note that the Duterte administration, in one of its major moves, had canceled the taxation of everyone getting below 20,000. So that was a direct gift, and maybe necessary gift to the common tao. But we have to note also that not only was this, they canceled all the tax payments by these people earning below 20,000, but actually, in fact, increased tax collections very substantially, as was presented by Mark Hoven. And not only with the ordinary enterprises, collected record taxes from the major taipans, but now they have this policy of lowering the tax rates, because this is putting us in competition with other ASEAN countries. So I think this we have a good team. We have to project in the next couple of months how the dealing with international investors and local enterprises will be. Our demographics are good. The policies, the first implementations of policy, should show a balance between helping the people and still incentivizing investments. And very important in building to the future, if the people see the policies are very future oriented, for instance, that we should be moving towards industrial revolution number 4. Education is so important. And if we look at the service business, we have been moving from the traditional manufacturing. Maybe some people are saying we're past the area where we can be effective in manufacturing, maybe in old manufacturing styles, but maybe in the new manufacturing we will be able to do it. But we are definitely should be educating our people to use the digital economy. It will bypass many of the weaknesses we have in the old structures.
Thank you for that, Professor Ranjit Rai and Mr. George C. We have Dr. Guido back in the room. Just a reminder to everybody, we will priority the questions from the media. We will have until maybe 11:30, 11:40, and then we will have some more personal discussion afterwards until lunch for those who want to stay. But for now, we'll priority the media. The next question is, what does this mean to the common tao, to the individual Filipinos, professors and Mr. George, about this inflation, and what can the individual Filipino do? No, what does this mean? The interest rates, the inflation. How can they prepare for the incoming? We heard that in other countries the inflation is even higher. US is 8.6%, UK is 9%, and even higher in some other countries.
Brazil.
Brazil, yes, correct.
Like 11.3%.
How is it in Spain, Pia? The red wine prices.
Sure, red wine prices. The Riojas. Well, those things are expensive. Cigarettes are still expensive. Wine's expensive. But, we have tax for those things. So you can expect, the people expect that they're expensive.
Yes. Mr. George, how can the Filipino prepare, or what can they do?
Well, there are things that are currently in play. to some extent, those who are not coming back to work, many people are actually not coming back physically to work, and so they save on the gasoline expenses. But I think that the transport fees, we have to be practical, because a lot of the transport is not on the road now, because the taxi drivers, the jeepney drivers feel that they are losing money if the adjustments to prices are not commensurate to the adjustments in costs. Now that's a matter of policy that I or we cannot determine. It's up to the government policy. But in terms of the interest rates, in terms of rice, I think the government has declared or given the idea that they might decide to subsidize rice. Now there may be people who are against this subsidy to keep rice at 20 pesos. We'll see. There's really no way to insulate against basic commodities. If wheat goes up, bread goes up, gasoline goes up. So we just have to find a way to lower our costs and to have alternative sources. For instance, in food, we just have to find, we can already start looking for ways to revive our agricultural sector. And some part of it will just have to be subsidized by government, or it's hard to say. It's hard to say at this point what if it's a worldwide matter. It's not because of a local blockage.
Thank you. Another question from our DTI friends is on RCEP. How will these regional arrangements affect, given that we want to prioritize our local industry development, and then we have to comply or fulfill our regional obligations?
The RCEP is the biggest trade deal in the world, and yes, it makes sense, and many countries did it because the Philippines has fluctuated from one model to another. So during a certain period of time, the Philippines had been very protectionist, and then during the time of FDR, it had been excessively opening up the economy. And you know what, I used to negotiate trade together with the DTI for some with Japan and the US. And you know what happened when we said that with ASEAN that okay, you drop your tariffs by this much because we have already dropped ours. You know how they said? They said what you did before doesn't count. So in that attempt to look like you were liberalizing early, we lost our cards for negotiation. So we have to be smart negotiators. This RCEP, but on the other hand, also we have to understand the pipeline of industry, which very few of our people here understand. So for instance, if we hurt a certain industry, let's say we could hurt the polyester industry, polyester manufacturing industry, but because we hurt it and took away its tariffs, we are able to enable the textile industry, or we hurt the textile industry, which today hardly exists already in the Philippines, so that we can enable the garments industry. So we have to look at things at the multi-industry level. It's not just a single level. So we need people who understand the interaction between industries throughout the whole pipeline. So this RCEP, now if we are not going to be able to become competitive over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years in certain industry, then we should see what moves we are making to become more competitive in that industry. If we are not making any moves, or we cannot, then just give up the industry. Forget trying to protect that, because there's no way. So by letting one industry go, we may very well be building up another. And also, of course, we're talking about industries. There are some that are very clearly favorable for the Philippines. We really, this pandemic management is very important, because we can potentially become a very important tourist destination. Our beaches are better than those of our most of our ASEAN neighbors, and our people have just the right personality, and we have all these medical workers. So we have to make use of these, but we have to unblock those legal blocks or cultural blocks on certain things. For instance, in the medical profession, which we had studied before, there are liability issues that the Philippines does not cover, and the legal system does not cover this, and the insurance doesn't cover this. So this prevents us from being a major medical center. We have these major weaknesses that we can deal with from a legislative viewpoint. But we have great strengths. We have all these nurses, we have all these hospitable people, we have all these institutions and US educated doctors. So we have to unlock some of our abilities. That's one way.
Thank you
I'd
for
like
that.
to add, I'd like to add to what Sir George was saying. No, I'm a big believer in RCEP. But again, as Sir George noted, we have to really study the implications. There's dogma a big believer in market and trade. But at the same time, we also have to look at how it's going to impact, for example, agriculture. And it's a complex, there's so many markets and businesses that are going to be affected by this. Government has to be prepared to provide support, no, for industries, especially in my view, our farmers and fisher folk. Not protection, but support, no. If we are going to go full force with RCEP, these are the real decisions, no, that a new administration has to look into, especially this kind of administration where the farmers and fisher folk voted for this particular president, and he has to provide some sort of relief, as we move forward. And that I agree with Sir George. We have to study the impact and see how government can provide, while at the same time staying competitive now as far as the global big picture is concerned.
Might I add that unlike other trade deals, this one is not only big. China will give and has given so much leeway that even countries that are opposed to it politically, including Japan and Korea, have found it not viable for them not to join. So despite this, so they're talking about timeframes for adjustment, say 30 years, which is not like the 5 or 10 years that other trade agreements. So if we don't think we can adjust in that period, then there's a question of if we will ever be able to adjust. So for instance, I think that unless we are going to accept that we are going to go back to industrial scale farming and cut up, we're talking about dealing with co-ops and consolidating lands from different owners. People have to know on the ground, it's very difficult to deal with all these families and heirs for 5,000 meters, for 1 hectare, for 2 hectares. You will go crazy doing it, and you get to all kinds of legal tangles. So if we're not going to industrialize production, then forget about competing on an agricultural viewpoint, unless a new technology comes in that we can make small farms viable. Now people are talking hydroponics. Do the people who are pushing hydroponics know how expensive the product of hydroponics is? No, they should check that before they start throwing those things. So we have to study things on the ground. Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity, but as Ranjit says, we do have to study it carefully, because we could shoot ourselves in the foot the way we did in the I have to say that we are not against FVR. FVR did a lot of things that were very good for the country: liberalization of foreign exchange, liberalization of banking, bringing in the rails and highways, but also
Telecoms, George.
yes,
Telecoms,
yes,
yeah,
or
the biggest
liberalizing
thing.
telecoms. So there's a lot, but there's also a lot of policies that went haywire. We have to get used to be more integrated in our analysis, because we tend to analyze things. If I'm Department of Labor, it's just labor. If I'm Department of Agri, it's just agri. No, we have to integrate our policies.
Thank you for that, Professor Ranjit and Mr. George. One more commercial break, and then we probably get one more questions and then closing statements. For those who have more questions, also for USEC Marco Ben, he shared his email with us. So please send your questions, and he had to run to another emergency meeting that was suddenly called. So please send us your questions, and this will be a fun poll. If you can travel in the near future, where will you go? Speaking of travel, one of our economic opportunities, if I may ask, is the travel already allowed to the Philippines fully? I know some countries have fully opened their travel. Professor Ranjit,
Yeah, it has no.
No more quarantine requirements or
Yeah. Well, OCTA was very instrumental in that. We were pushing for first increase in number of daily travelers, then later on a reduction in the quarantine to full reduction of quarantine rules and regulations. We understood that this was very important to jumpstarting the economy and even helping certain companies like PAL, for example, which had some continues to have challenges. So there, as far as I know, we're as open as we can, no, given the pandemic, and which is good.
So just sharing the result now. We have US at 25% of our audience, Europe at 10%, ASEAN neighbors at 20%, Japan that recently just opened for tourists, 25%, China 5%, domestic travel at 15%. All right. Okay, Pia, questions from the media? Pia, you're on mute. Can you please unmute?
Oh, I'm sorry. For Yusek Juven this time.
Wala na si Yusek Joven.
Wala na siya.
But if
Okay,
it's economic or
kasi maybe we can pass it on to him na lang so that he knows later on. Maybe, or I think his email is here.
Yes, we'll email it to him. Yes.
Okay, so other questions from the media. How can we prevent a surge? Do you think that another lockdown could come up? Do we see another lockdown coming our way?
Professor David can answer that. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for the question. We don't foresee a lockdown this time. I mean, even in January when the surge was more massive, we didn't have a lockdown. So the reason for that, of course, is the vaccinations. It has helped us navigate this pandemic. So as far as we're concerned, we don't foresee any. I mean, if the government might decide to move alert levels, but that would be the worst case. I mean, as far as the lockdowns are concerned, I think we won't be seeing any more of that ECQ, MECQ types.
Thank you, Dr. Vito. Professor Ranjit, I think also people are asking, just putting it together now, Austin, because there are a lot of things that are just coming out. So in terms of rural areas, how many % of samples are rural? Like in my own experience also, I think there are more people in those areas that don't actually even believe in our vaccines. So
okay, yeah, that's a great question. Something like 5% of the population is unwilling to get themselves vaccinated. That's quite low. Okay, and of that, more than a quarter are from the rural areas. In fact, you can almost see a majority are not educated. A lot of them are in the rural areas, and there's actually a percentage, something like 3 or 4%, who believe that vaccines are not necessary. I'm sorry, 9% of that 5% total are anti-vaxxers, no? And these come from different, they're not just from the rural areas, they're also from the middle class and the rich. So there's a percentage, but it's very nominal. And you'll be surprised, something like 70% of Filipinos are willing to get boosted. Yeah. But hardly anyone goes to the center to get boosted. So it's also a conundrum for us. They're willing to get boosted at least once. They understand, a majority understand the importance of the boosters, but they're not going to the health centers. And I think part of the reason is because we've opened up. There's a lot of overconfidence. There's a lack of vigilance now. And even while we are in the midst of this pandemic, no? We believe that, from OCTA's point of view, we just want to provide the data analytics, no? the state of COVID in the country. Where we have seen that this variant, if it's going to be dominant, will make us will provide us much more leeway to make decisions, veering away from lockdowns. I don't think we'll be having the kinds of lockdowns. Let's reiterate that we had last year. That's good because it's a manageable variant. No, and Professor David will also say, I don't know what's the threshold now. It used to be for OCTA around 2,500 cases. We locked down because we know it's going to fill up the hospitals. But even with that number, with this new variant, Pia, we're not going to lock down.
Yeah.
So I don't think we will lock down anymore. Okay, we might go up to an alert level, but that's the decision of government.
Right.
And there are economic consequences. There's scientific data and economic consequences to certain decisions, and the government will make that decision. We were some of the initial drivers for alert levels. No, we followed the UK model in our own proposals, but we have a different alert level system, and that alert level system has to also be revamped. No, given the new situation that we're in now. So that's my position on the issue. Yeah.
Well, what do you think are we doing right? So I can brag in the other side of the the globe.
For the interest of time, that will be what do you look forward to, as well as maybe closing remarks on suggestions or recommendations on the way forward, maybe 2 minutes each. And then for the media, please, I sent our email on the chat box, and please text us your information and email for the media kit. For those who want to stay afterwards, we have what we call a chica moment. You can ask personal questions. I think if Mr. George is happy before lunch, he might give us some investment tips on where we should put our money, especially for personal interest, where we should put our money, especially in today's time. Professors, we also have other educators here in the room from UP, LaSalle, Ateneo, and other universities across the country. So I think they might have some questions for you as well. So stay tuned for that if you're free. We normally have a physical forum where we will have a little bit of sharing a meal. So hopefully we can have that soon and meet each other again. Without further ado, short closing remarks from Professor David, Professor Ranjit, and Mr. George.
Okay, well, I'll start with, and thank you again for the invitation, and everyone. So, it's been 2 years since the start of the pandemic. And, during that time, we had some struggles early on. At some point we were having lockdowns, every few months. And the reason we supported the lockdowns then was that the hospital system was struggling, and that was a reality. It was only necessary to really save the hospitals during that time and to save lives. At this time, I think after 2 years of the pandemic, aside from having vaccinated a significant percentage of the population, which helps build our wall of immunity, I think most Filipinos have also learned to live with the pandemic. And I think this is also critical at this time. People know if they are vulnerable, or if they have people who are vulnerable, we know how to in effect protect them. And those the rest of the population who feel that they can take care of themselves, so it's more of a personal responsibility. That being said, of course, cases are rising. It won't be as bad as what we saw in January. So lacking any government intervention, we have to follow minimum public health standards. That's really our safest bet. Get ourselves vaccinated, get ourselves boosted. I agree with the points Professor Ranjit mentioned early on about strengthening institutions. I think these are key for the next administration. Strengthening institutions and the infrastructure, the public health system. The pandemic exposed some of the things that we needed to improve, such as biosurveillance, genome sequencing, testing. We have come a long way. Things are going right now. We're able to manage the pandemic better than many other countries. I think that's in part due to the vaccination program, to our wall of immunity. But yeah, it's we hope that the pandemic will go away soon. So time will tell. Even the state of emergency, it might be, that will be. We will see how that plays out, within this year. So yeah, until then, let's just do our part and be cautious. Stay safe, and hope that this surge will just pass as quickly, just like what we saw in other countries. Yan lang. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Guido. Thank you for that. Dr.
Yeah.
Prof. Ranjit.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for inviting us. I'd like to end on a couple of points. One is that the OCTA research is here to stay. Professor David and I were only doing this as a research project in March of 2020. We thought it would last for 2 months. Then we go back to watching K-drama and living our lives the way we normally do, no? But it's become an advocacy for us, and OCTA research is here to provide up-to-date data, no, on the state of COVID-19 and the pulse of the nation. No? We believe that it's important for the country to be informed. It's important for not just for everyday decision making, but also for the fact that, as we move forward, as Sir George was trying to say, we cannot move forward if we do not know who we are and what we want. No, and surveys are a tool to provide us knowledge about who we are, so we can reflect on us and properly define where we want to go, no, as a country. So we believe in surveys, we believe in data analytics. We believe that it should be provided not just to top government officials or to rich corporations, no, but to everyday Filipinos, because we believe that Filipinos better informed make better decisions about themselves. Ultimately, and I guess this is probably one factor I'd like to emphasize why we are successful, not successful, but where we're thriving at the moment, not yet successful, no, but thriving at the moment, is because in the end, people make government work. We have to give it to the Filipino people. They won this. They're winning this pandemic. No, it's not government. No, in the end, what people do is far more important than anything government does, whether it's in the issue of pandemic or restoring this economy. And the more we strengthen people, no, through social development programs, retraining them, providing them subsidy, no, because in this time of dearth and uncertainty, government has to come in and help people. We're going to be good, because in a democracy like ours, a developing democracy like ours, you strengthen people, you strengthen democracy, you create a pathway, a condition for sustainable and equitable development. And I hope this government will focus on that. We'll never lose sight of the fact that it's people that make government work. It's people that will make this democracy thrive. And that it's people investing in people and their future that will make sustainable development realized.
Yes.
Sir George.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Prof. I think I was unmuted. I was muted. So thank you again, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Well, we want to thank our media friends here. You have a very important role in not only giving facts and news, but also giving perspectives that will allow people to make better decisions, both individually and also as organizations and institutions. No? And of course, very much to Professors Ranjit and Guido here, helping us together with IDSI. One thing we want to create a more objective-based, data-based decision framework, decision analysis system for government and individuals to put some science into the art of decision making, as well as execution here, which the government has. I think everyone has seen that this government, despite the very, very polarized state prior to elections, after elections somehow it has calmed down, and people are willing to see what this government is able to do. And let's work together to move it towards a more scientific basis and a faster execution basis. And if there are things we don't agree with, that are, we have to remember nothing is perfect. So we just have to maybe take that view that our neighboring countries have done. There might be issues that come up, but what we have to see is the overall net and just keep moving forward. And so the IDSI is trying, IDSI is trying to help disseminate these informations and have people have access to the experts at the latest times. And what I can say is, let's all not wait for government. Let's help government, help each other, but let's not wait for government, because we, in this digital age, we all have access to so much information and so much enablers that we can just keep learning and keep executing in our own. And that's how we'll all move forward. As we have seen many of our ASEAN neighbors, despite whatever upheavals they might have, despite whatever forms of government may take or what administrations take over, if you keep working, you will keep moving towards the direction we want to go towards. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out this today.
Thank you so much, Sir George. Austin?
Thank you very much. And of course, thank you to my beautiful, charming, and very intelligent and globally connected Miss Pia Morato for joining us today, all the way from Barcelona, who
I'm
has
gonna brag.
she had a few red wines before.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
we
gonna
should have
brag
some,
because Dr. Guido said that we're not locking down, and also Prof. Ranjit. So I'm gonna say, come to the Philippines, right?
Yeah, come to the Philippines. Thank you, Pia. Thank you. Let's go. Let's all go to the Philippines. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
George, you're on mute.
Yeah, that's this view from Dr. Guido and Ranjit is a big thing to just know that we're not going to lock down will make people not hesitate and move forward.
Right. Yes.
OCTA has become trendsetters. And most importantly, I think policies now are more grounded because they are based on scientific research. And of course, Professor Randy, Professor Guido David and Professor Ranjit Rai are experts not only on statistics.
Maybe Austin, something you asked that maybe I'll drop in with the people. If in the investment field, you have any savings and you're keeping them in the bank and you're earning less than 1%, almost anything you do will outperform that. So look for any kind of investments. Actually, there will be REITs or other corporate bonds from major corporations or even corporate stocks that are yielding dividends that yearly that are higher than that. So it's easy to outperform what you're doing if you're just depositing in the bank. And for anybody who has not yet purchased property or doesn't have a residence, even if you don't live in it, if you buy even if it's a starter home, a low cost affordable home, you can use your pag-ibig because the pag-ibig is is lending at only 3.5% versus the bank's lending at 6 to 7%. So make use of that since you're paying for that. No? And if you buy in the right place, you can also amortize part of it through the rentals that you get. And yeah, so these are some basic things, because whatever you do, if you have certain cash flow, I would say you buy, because entering business at this stage is rather risky. So don't try to think that you're gonna just, unless it's a trading business, you build something and sell it. If you are able to buy something, the inflation rate is much higher already now than, let's say, 3.5%, right? So you can be certain that you're going to outperform that over time. And then if you have other sources of income, maybe something bigger than that. So that's a few tips to get into. Almost anything will do better as long as don't get into risky things. Forget the NFTs, cryptos, and things like that.
Sir, if I may we ask, as we mentioned earlier, US, UK 9% inflation. Do you see the Philippines inflation increasing?
It's the inflation. We're subject to worldwide forces. So if these we're not a major producing country, we're a consuming country. That's what something I think Dr. Ranjit has said. It's hollow and it's shallow. It's true. It's hollow. And so our growth, whereas we are very much looked at as a major investment destination now in the last 10 years, the Philippines has performed about 6.5%, which is at the upper range of the whole world. And they expect to continue to do at 6 to 7% going forward. But we are doing this through consumption. If we don't build a base, then other countries, we are growing, but that income is also flowing to other countries when it could just cycle inside our own country. No? So, but in terms of inflation, unless we make major moves in one way to ride it is to buy property. No, if we're talking about riding it because producing ourselves, then there are a lot of steps, fundamentals. It's kind of hard for us to implement that or recommend that at this stage. It's up to government and individual people to ride on what the government does.
For our media friends and our professors and students as well, we were getting free investment advice from one of the most sought after investment mentor as well, Mr. George Shi, who is not only an Wharton-trained economist, but also a respected business community leader, also an officer in the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and the Dynamic Anvil Business Club. So you can also chime in anytime. Another question, going back to the economic situation globally, can you comment on the debt trap, the Sri Lanka situation? Is the Philippines in danger of that?
Well, the debt trap that people are referring to, yes, there are projects that failed in different countries, but if we look at the Philippines and most of these countries, they're talking about the debt trap. 80 to 90% of the loans are by multilateral institutions and not by China. And then the failed projects, it is true, it's up to us, the proponent country, what projects they will put it into. Nobody's forcing you to borrow the money. What we have seen is that in the past, even in the Philippines, the major industrial projects and all the failed industrial projects were funded by the IMF and the World Bank. And in fact, the IMF and World Bank instituted on us during the time of Jobo Fernandez, 45% interest rates, and then again during the Asian crisis. So not only did they do that, they forced the Philippine companies to go bankrupt, declare bankruptcy, foreclosed on the assets, bought the assets at 10 cents to the dollar, and then sold them at 30 to 40 cents to the dollar, immediately tripling or quadrupling their income. So when we're talking about debt traps, it's for people of weak analytical ability, but we have people like Guido and Mark Hoven here. And so if we analyze and propose our own projects, then we have to be responsible for it like any borrower. They're just making the money available. And also, if people look at it, the Chinese terms of the financing are quite favorable. Those offered, not every loan is favorable, but on the whole, if you negotiate for it, they are in many of cases much more favorable than that of the multilateral institutions. But it's still our responsibility. We can't borrow money and say that the lender is the one at fault.
Maybe some personal questions for some of our students here. Professor Dido David, you're a mathematician and you worked in the States for several years. What was the inspiration for you to come back?
Well, Austin, I mean, some may find it hard to believe, but actually enjoy it in the Philippines. I mean, I just went there for my studies. I was raised, I grew up, well, I'm part of the government initiatives because I was a scholar, in high school and in college. And so, this is my way of sort of giving back to the country that helped me become what I am today. And I feel that the opportunities in the Philippines are actually quite good right now for academics. It was probably different in the past, but more scientists are actually coming back to the Philippines now. So the previous notion of the brain drain that actually has, I won't say that has reversed completely, but I mean, around the time when I was studying, a lot of Filipino scientists or academics were migrating out of the country, but now a lot of them are returning, and we're actually, in UP, we actually don't have many slots available for professors anymore, whereas before we had a lot of vacancies because of the brain drain. But yeah, and this is a good sign, and this is a good sign moving forward for the country if scientists and academics are being retained, not just because of the opportunities, but it will be a cycle. The scientists and researchers, I believe, will be able to help the country grow even further. I mean, maybe we could have, industrial or, scientific or technological progression that the other Asian neighbors have seen over the past years. I mean, maybe we're due for that now already within the near future.
Great. And Professor Ranjit Rai, a political science professor who became the VP for academic affairs in the UP system, and then now entrepreneur who's giving back to the country. What inspired that? Of course, you mentioned.
I'll clarify some things now. I'm not yet a doctor. I'm finishing my PhD now, and then I'm second. I'm assistant vice president for the University of the Philippines. Not yet a VP. Hopefully soon, or in the future. But I mean, Guido and I were born on the same neighborhood. We're second generation faculty members. So our parents were also public school teachers. So you tend to follow in the footsteps of your parents. Third thing I want to clarify is, that's what I hope and dream to be, an entrepreneur, just like George C. So Guido and I are completely not entrepreneurs. We're learning to be. See, OCTA is a non-stock, non-profit organization, so it's not. We organize it not really for profit, but really as public service. No. Why we're doing it? Because why not? Diba? You only have one country, and you have to love this one country that you have. And as academics, during the time of pandemic, we didn't know how to deal with the trauma and the reality of living in a world in a pandemic, in the midst of a pandemic. And this is our way of trying to deal with it, trying to understand it, and sharing our understanding with people around us so that they become less anxious, they're able to make good decisions, and that we're able to move together as a community and as a nation. Again, it's a whole of nation approach for dealing with COVID is a collective effort, so everybody has to help. In the end, what we do as individuals, what we do as citizens, is far more important than anything government does. So that's what we think in OCTA. That's how we conceptualize OCTA, and it's a free organization. People who are volunteer scientists can join, and we have people who are not from UP in OCTA. So we have two of our best fellows, Father Nicanor Austriaco, and who I hope will be the next DOST secretary, or Dr. Benjamin Ko, one of the best doctors, infectious disease doctors in the country, are from UST, University of Santo Tomas. And quite a number of faculty from Ateneo also have also indicated that they want to volunteer. So this is a non-profit organization. It's not entrepreneurial. Although we have a survey company that we have to sustain, and we're hoping that we generate profits so we can provide more free surveys for the public.